All right. Excuse me. Good evening, forecasters. As I come for you. Let's try this again in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, forecasters. Wow, I am struggling. Well, it's a good thing I'm not recording yet for my blog. So let's try this, or my podcast. Blah, blah. One more time. Good evening, forecasters, and welcome to my live stream of episode 3 of season 2 of the Prez Forecast. Before I get started with my actual podcast, I'm still doing a little bit of research on this because tonight for the podcast, switching things up a little bit, trying to move my microphone where it's not invading the space of my mouse. I'm still doing a little research on the elections that I'm actually covering tonight, because tonight for this episode is going to be the 4th and 5th quadrennial elections that occurred in the United States in 1800 and 1804. So gathering just that little piece of information before I really get started on this. So there's going to be a lot of stops and actual silence while I'm getting this together. So if you watch this at a later date, as no one's currently watching, which is not that big a deal to me at this point. I don't know what this is doing. Interesting. Anyways, so I'm about to get the process started, and really the only reason I live stream this is to give people kind of a background on what I go through to make a podcast. And again, if you're just now joining on this video, you've not heard my podcast, you can find it at Anchor FM, or just really Anchor, but the address is anchor.fm/Prez Forecast. Just getting this set up, ready to go. And we're about to start. I'm not going to give any major information on what I'm going to be talking about on the podcast until I actually start the podcast. Now, what I will tell you is when I am discussing the elections, and again, for those brand new to the YouTube channel, never heard my forecast before, I am running through all 59 presidential elections that we've had in our history. I've already talked about the first 2 elections, the first and second quadrennial elections that saw George Washington elected and then reelected. And my last forecast was actually on the 3rd quadrennial election that saw John Adams, who was the vice president to George Washington, elected president over Thomas Jefferson. So what we're working on tonight is the election of 1800, and which is the election that saw Thomas Jefferson elected president, and the election of 1804 that saw Jefferson's re-election. So let me go ahead and get started with this process. But the basic structure, the basic skeleton of how I will be doing my election podcast is I'll be obviously talking about the year that it happened, when it happened, because for several years under the older system, the elections actually took 2 months to run successfully. Not just on the second Tuesday in November. That wasn't actually decided until a later date. And up until the 1804 election, electors for the electoral college portion actually voted twice. Basically, whoever got the most delegates or the most votes and hit that number they were supposed to hit would win the presidency. Whoever came in second would win the vice presidency. Now, in the last episode, which I'll discuss more on my podcast, which I just realized I'm recording. I did not actually mean for it to start recording. So that's going to be deleted here in a minute. The election of 1796 was actually the only election where we had the president and vice president from two completely different parties. So once I get my podcast reset back up, as I recorded for just a little over a minute without actually meaning to. Okay. So I think I'm about ready to start my podcast. And away. Gotta hit record first. Away we go. Good evening, forecasters. This is Michael Hendricks coming to you on January 16th with Season 2, Episode 3 of the Prez Forecast. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about the 4th and 5th quadrennial presidential elections, and the reason I am covering two this evening is because the president that was elected in 1800, Thomas Jefferson, did get reelected in 1804. As a side note, to kind of condense this a little bit more than what I'd originally planned, instead of doing each election as an individual episode, I've decided that for those presidents who actually were reelected, I would do just one episode for them. It just makes more sense in that manner. So again, we're going to be covering the 4th and 5th quadrennial presidential elections, starting with, of course, the 4th quadrennial presidential election, which took place in 1800. Now, what's interesting is this is the last election to take place where electors actually voted twice. Again, if you remember from the first three presidential elections, they didn't, when they voted, they just voted for the person. They didn't say, I'm voting for George Washington to be president, I'm voting for John Adams to be vice president. They just put names on a ballot, and whoever came out on top and won the required number, which was half, they would become president. Whoever came in second would become vice president. Now, the election of 1800, which is also referred to as the Revolution of 1800, this is actually the last election that this will happen. I'll discuss it a little bit more in depth when we get to the 5th quadrennial presidential election, because in 1804, the 12th Amendment was ratified, which completely changed the electoral process. Now, in 1800, this is the first election under the first party system where both political parties actually fully nominate candidates to run. And of course, John Adams, who became president in the 3rd quadrennial election in 1796, is running for re-election. And they did not put anyone else up against him. He was running on his own with Charles C. Pinckney as his running mate. Now, if you remember from the 1796 election, John Adams won in a kind of contentious battle, and Thomas Jefferson ended up coming in second after votes were changed legally, and he became vice president. So here we have a case where the president of the United States is running for re-election against the vice president. Now, on the Democratic-Republican side, of course, we did have Vice President Thomas Jefferson from Virginia running for president. We also had former U.S. Senator Aaron Burr from New York running for president, although he was actually running as Jefferson's running mate. And then we had on the Federalist side, President John Adams from Massachusetts, and the former Minister to France, Charles C. Pinckney from South Carolina, also running as the Federalist. That's basically who would be running for president and vice president. Jefferson and Burr on the Democratic-Republican side, John Adams and Charles Pinckney on the Federalist side. Now, to give a little bit of a spoiler alert, Thomas Jefferson would, of course, win this election to become the 3rd president of the United States. And this would actually, with his election, usher in a full generation of Democratic-Republican leadership. If you know anything about your history, specifically United States history, you know that the Democratic-Republican Party, when it finally loses its steam and we move into the second political party system, the Democratic Republican Party splits, and we have the Democratic Party, which is still in existence today. The Republican portion of that name would completely disappear. We would not see the Republican Party actually come into being as a political party until 1860, a couple of years before that. So that is the introduction for tonight. That's what we're going to be doing, talking about the 1800 United States presidential election and the 1804 United States presidential election. Checking my time. Good. Yep. So the 1800 United States presidential election was, again, the fourth quadrennial presidential election. It was held from October 31st to December 3rd, 177 years before my birthday. And it is sometimes referred to as the Revolution of 1800. Vice President Thomas Jefferson, of course, defeated President John Adams. And this was the political realignment and really the solidification of the first party system that, again, as I just previously stated just a couple of minutes ago, gave us a generation of Democratic Republican leadership. This is the last election before the 12th Amendment. And I will go ahead and tell you that part of this race, if you've seen, wow, I just completely lost the name of Hamilton. Apologies there. If you've seen Hamilton, you may remember the song "The Election of 1800," which focuses on Alexander Hamilton's effect on the outcome of the election. He actually backed Jefferson over over Adams, which was a bit of a political story in that time. The musical does, of course, take creative liberties, because when you're creating musicals or stories or movies, you need to add and subtract some things to make it a little bit more interesting, because it does suggest that Burr campaigned for president against Jefferson, Aaron Burr, rather than on the same ticket. Now, what we'll talk about here in a few segments is that there were allegations that Burr was running for president against Jefferson than on the same ticket. But the way that Hamilton portrays it's as if they are running opposed, and they weren't running opposed. They were indeed running on the same ticket. It also inaccurately suggests that after the tie-breaking vote made him president, Jefferson used his power as president to make it so that Burr would not be his vice president. This is, again, completely untrue, as Burr did serve his entire term, 4 years, as vice president. Now, the story of Burr after this is a sad and really depressing one, because not only does he end up losing all political power, because he ends up running for governor of New York after he leaves the vice presidency and actually absolutely gets blown out to really someone with no name at all. But, of course, he ends up shooting and killing a former friend and colleague, Alexander Hamilton. So next segment, what I'm going to talk about is the main part that of course selects presidents, and that is the electoral vote. And then we'll follow that with a segment, probably a short one, on the popular vote. So now, right now, what I'm doing is scratch my back. But what I'm doing is I've ended one segment. I'm letting it process. And once it is done processing, I will, of course, put it into the episode and start my next segment. Now, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the time we're living in right now. For those who don't know, I'm a public school education teacher. I don't know why I said it that way. I'm a teacher in a public school. We've been in virtual all year long. We're staying virtual for the foreseeable future. Of course, you had the insurrection last week. I just haven't been on my game with my podcast, but I'm pushing through because I really actually do find elections interesting. Sometimes I just get my words switched around. It is what it is. Yeah, editing that first one to give it a name. Fourth. Find a name. There it is. First segment is up. Now I got to reposition myself. And here's one thing you will not really see in my podcast is the campaign, because as a presidential forecaster, I'm more interested in the election process. I don't care about the campaign process all that much. What led to who getting elected or not getting elected? I'm just interested in the votes and how it actually happened. Just going over some information. Okay, there's some good information. Okay. So, as we move on to the Electoral College election of 1800, something happens that is quite interesting, and it actually caused a lot of tension, and probably the main reason that Burr did not run for vice president under Thomas Jefferson for the second election, as Thomas Jefferson eventually pushed him out. But because it was felt that Burr was actually campaigning for the presidency instead of the vice presidency, we actually, at the end of voting, had a tie. The way this had been set up for the first election, second and third election, and even the fourth election, is those two gentlemen that were campaigning with each other campaigned for the main person who was running for president to get one more vote than the person running for vice president. And we see a really big reason why the 12th Amendment was added in 1804, because they always managed to screw it up. That's how Thomas Jefferson ended up being the vice president in 1796, because Hamilton and the Federalists screwed up their voting, and Jefferson managed to finish second. But in the 1800 election, Thomas Jefferson received 73 electoral votes. Aaron Burr received 73 electoral votes. Now, the number of electoral votes needed at the time was 70, so they both got the subsequent numbers. As far as John Adams, he ended up finishing third with 65 electoral votes. Charles Pinckney, who was his vice president's running mate, ended up with 64. Keep in mind that the Federalists actually got their act together right this time and voted Charles Pinckney one less than John Adams. And then John Jay, who also was a Federalist, managed to pick up one electoral vote. And we'll see those election results here in a minute. But what this does, because there is a tie, they had to go to a contingent election in the House of Representatives. Now, under the terms laid out in the Constitution, the outgoing House of Representatives chose between Jefferson and Burr. This is when it comes out that Burr was accused of campaigning for the presidency himself. And it took 36 ballots, 36 different ballots in the House of Representatives before Jefferson eventually did win the presidency. And basically how this happened is thanks to Alexander Hamilton, who favored Jefferson over Burr. Now, up to that point, Burr and Hamilton, that was kind of alluded to in the musical, they were colleagues, and they were sometimes friends. They weren't great friends. But it was always known that Hamilton had no love lost at all for Jefferson. So when he decided in 1800 to back Jefferson, after all hell breaks loose. And Hamilton, of course, ends up dead at the hand of Burr 5 years later. So this is how each state voted. As far as the tied electoral college in Connecticut, Adams and Pinckney both ended up with 9 apiece. In Delaware, Adams and Pinckney ended up with 3 apiece. Georgia, Jefferson and Burr ended up with 4 apiece. Kentucky, Jefferson and Burr ended up with 4 apiece. Maryland, here's a fun one. 5 went to Jefferson, 5 went to Burr, 5 went to Adams, 5 went to Pinckney. Completely split ballot. Massachusetts, 16 went to Adams as well as Pinckney. In New Hampshire, Adams and Pinckney both picked up 6 apiece. In New Jersey, they both picked up 7 apiece. New York, Jefferson and Burr picked up 12 apiece. In North Carolina, Jefferson and Burr each picked up 8 apiece, with Adams and Pinckney picking up 4 apiece. In Pennsylvania, and just as an aside, this is how our elections should go now. If one person has a slight lead of a 51-49%, basically, that person should only get one more electoral vote than the person coming in second, and not all of them. I don't like the winner-take-all system. But Pennsylvania, 8 go to Jefferson and Burr apiece, 7 go to Adams and Pinckney apiece. In Rhode Island, this is the state that actually gave 1 electoral vote to Jay, but Adams received 4 and Pinckney received 3. And this is probably why Jay got 1, is to make sure that Pinckney ended up with 1 less than Adams. In South Carolina, Jefferson and Burr picked up 8 apiece. Tennessee, Jefferson and Burr picked up 3 apiece. And then in Vermont, Adams and Pinckney picked up 4 apiece. And Virginia Jefferson and Burr picked up 21 each in Virginia. Totaling again 73, 73, 65, 64, and 1. So we move on to the contingent election that took place in 1801. Take my time, I'm good. Again, in the 1st through 35th ballots, which occurred on between February 11th and the 17th, the vote ended up amazingly all 35 times the same way, with Thomas Jefferson receiving 8 votes, which was about 50%, Aaron Burr receiving 6 votes, 37.5%, and then 2 divided votes, 12.5%, giving Jefferson, in order to win, Jefferson would have needed to pick up 9. He hit 8 in those 35 times. And then again, in that 36th ballot, after Hamilton announced his support for Thomas Jefferson receives 10, which put him over the top, with Aaron Burr receiving only 4. And then there were 2 blanks left. That's 16 states, 16 votes. And I just want to see where the change actually took place. What state changed? And interesting. It was Maryland who gave their support. Maryland and Virginia who gave their support to Jefferson, where Burr lost Delaware and South Carolina, interesting enough, who had voted for Burr in the first 35 ballots, did not vote on the subsequent 36 ballot that gave Jefferson the win. So, as I do with every election, we go over the method of choosing electors. In Kentucky, Maryland, and North Carolina, the state is divided into electoral districts, with 1 elector chosen per district by the voters of that district. In Rhode Island and Virginia, each elector is chosen by the voters statewide. In Tennessee, they had 3 systems available. The state is divided into electoral districts, with 1 elector chosen per district. Each county chooses an electoral delegate by popular vote. and each elector is chosen by elector delegates of the counties within their district. And then in all the rest of the states, the other 10 states, each elector is appointed by the state legislature. So before I move on and talk about the popular vote, which we don't have very many states on it, at this time, the United States is really starting to form up. We have the Northwest Territories, we have the Indiana Territory, and then we have what would become the Mississippi Territory, and then eventually Mississippi and Alabama. So Jefferson wins the election with the Electoral College out. John Adams becomes the first president in the United States history to lose a presidential election. Take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about the popular vote. Now, see, that segment went a little bit longer than I wanted it to. It went about 9.5 minutes. So now what I'm going to do is, once this processes, they have a really nice tool on Anchor that lets you split it up. So I'm going to actually go through this and try to find a good breaking point to kind of break that down. 8 minutes is kind of too long, which is what the first segment went. But edging on 9 minutes for one segment, that's way too long. So I got to break that down a little bit. I'm going on 26 minutes, and I have not recorded that much. So, and I had planned on doing all of these, and I'm sorry about that tap. I planned on doing these all on just Saturdays in the afternoon. Haven't been able to do that yet, even though it's Saturday night. There we go. Rename it. And I'm sorry for that pause. There we go. I'm going to put that into my episode, but now I need to break it up. And basically how I do this is I look through it, see where there's a nice gap in my voicing. And it looks, still going to be 6 minutes. That's not a really good breaking point. In North Carolina, you're probably hearing a repeat. 8 apiece, with Adams and Pinckney picking up 4 apiece. New York, Jefferson and Burr picked up 12 apiece. In North Carolina, Jefferson and Burr each picked up 8 apiece, with Adams and Pinckney picking up 4 apiece. And in Pennsylvania, and just as an aside, this is how our election should go now. If one person has a slight lead of 51-49%, basically, so it sounds like there's a good point. Get one more election. So we move on to 373, 65, 64, and 1. That's a perfect point. It's not exactly half and half, but I go from one segment to another. Awesome. So save it as multiple segments. And now I've broken my second segment now into 3 segments. I'm letting this process before I carry on. Five and 3 minutes. That's not too bad. I'll stick with it. All right. So we're about to go into the next segment, the final segment of the 4th quadrennial election. It's not going to be as long because popular vote just really wasn't a thing yet at this time. But the way that I'm going to actually extend this segment and to actually talk about the 12th Amendment that was passed. All right. So now we're going to talk about the popular vote, and there really is not much to talk about. We still don't have a lot of numbers, even though a lot of states at this point were doing popular elections, but not all states were. But we can say that for the 1800 presidential election, the turnout was 32.3%, which is above 1796 election by 12.2 percentage points. So, more people are getting into the voting spirit. And so basically what I'm going to do for this segment is just briefly talk about the popular vote and then go more in depth into the 12th Amendment that changes the Electoral College process. All right. And see, here's the other issue with the voting process at this time. The election, the voting actually started in April, and they could vote until October. And then the Electoral College election would be held in November. But it looks like out of the 16 states, I believe, out of the 16 states, we only have numbers for 4. Kentucky held an election, but we don't have any of their numbers. Tennessee also held an election. We don't have any of their numbers. So we can only look at Maryland, North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Virginia. 3 of these won by Jefferson, 1 by Adams. In Maryland, and it was actually close. Thomas Jefferson received 10,637 of the votes, while John Adams received 10,068. He won by 569 votes, or 2.74%. In North Carolina, it was also a relatively close election. Jefferson received 11,916 votes to John Adams' 10,702 votes, with a margin for Jefferson of 1,214 votes. And percentage-wise, he won by 5.36%. And Rhode Island, the one state that we have reporting, voted for Adams. He received 2,353 votes to Jefferson's 2,159 votes. This was a margin of difference for Adams of 194 points, or in percentage points, about 4.3. Virginia was a total washout for Adams. Jefferson won the state, winning 21,002 votes to John Adams' 6,175 votes, a difference of 14,827 votes, or when we look at the percentages, 54.56%. Yeah, and that's it for the popular vote. So what I actually want to do now is, in this transition, go ahead and talk about the 12th Amendment, which would be in place by the time the next election was held. So basically, the 12th Amendment provides the procedure for electing the president and vice president. It replaced the procedure provided in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3, in which the Electoral College originally functioned. Again, it was ratified on June 15th, 1804. So here's the text. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president. Basically, what this is changing is that when they do vote, they have to name who they are voting for president and who they are voting for vice president. The president of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and votes shall then be counted. We just saw this happen last week when Vice President Mike Pence, who is the president of the Senate is always the vice president, opened the ballots, and then a riot happened and insurrection happened and all that fun stuff. but they did eventually open the ballots, count them, and certified that Biden had won. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted as president. House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all states shall be necessary to do a choice. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president, whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them before the 4th day of March next following, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of death or other constituted disability of the president. That last piece has changed because they've changed when the inaugural actually is. It's now in January. Basically, what that section is talking about is whoever wins the majority of the electors, whatever it's set at, which is 1 more than half, becomes the president-elect, becomes the president. If no one does, it goes to the House of Representatives where each state votes. They get 1 vote. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president. If the number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, it's the same thing as the president. But it completely changes it to now where they're having to identify who they're voting for as president, who they're voting for as vice president. It becomes a little bit easier to select the person. Here's a fun little fact. The first state to ratify was North Carolina on December 22nd, 1803. New Hampshire voted in June 15th, 1804, and that is, at the time, 3/4 of the states, 13 of 17. That is when it was ratified. Tennessee then ratified it on July 27th, 1804. Massachusetts, they were very late to the game on this one. They ratified it in 1961. Soon, if there's any. Let's see. Starting with the election of 1804, each presidential election has been conducted under the 12th Amendment. Only once since then has the House of Representatives chosen a president in a contingent election. This occurred in 1824, as none of the 4 candidates won an absolute majority, which was 131 at the time. And Andrew Jackson ended up winning with 99 electoral votes in that before the subsequent election or the contingent election. So here it is that up to after 4 elections, where it was just a fumbled mess, and the House did have to decide who would be president. Once they pushed in the 12th Amendment in 1804, it only happened 1 more time after that. All right, so that is it for the 4th quadrennial election. We're going to move on to the 5th, which is the re-election of Thomas Jefferson. Hope everyone is enjoying the live feed. All 1 of us. I think it's me, actually. And really what I'm trying to decide right now is whether to continue doing it here. That's not what I wanted. Or to actually keep doing it on Facebook. I like to share out, but oddly enough, even though I'm live right now, it clearly says I'm live. I can't share it out on my other account. Interesting. Okay. There you go. All right. Let's see if that has finished up so I can move on to the 3rd. Or the 5th, I mean. All right. Now we move on to the 5th. And before I actually start recording, I just want to go over some information, make sure I have my information right so I'm not stumbling over myself. Okay, let's see. And it wasn't much of an election. It was really a blowout. I actually do want to see one thing. I want to know. Huh. Okay. There you go. Okay, start one. Okay. Nope. That's Madison. Wow. Poor Charles Pickney ran twice. Actually, he ran a bunch of times and lost every single election. All right. Let me see that date. 1820. Okay. Oops. All right. So now we are moving on to the 1804 presidential election, which is the 5th quadrennial presidential election. This featured Thomas Jefferson going up against Charles C. Pickney, who has ran in every single election up to this point. He would run again in 1808 and lose again. This would actually be the second straight loss in the presidential election for the Federalist Party, and they would never win again. They actually only won as a party in 1796. They would never win the presidency again after that. In fact, by 1820, they would not even field a presidential candidate. It was actually, I'm going to have to check it as I go through, but it may be the only time that we have an election where someone is running essentially unopposed. So, this election was held between Friday, November 2nd and Wednesday, December 5th of 1804. At this point, there were 176 members of the Electoral College, so you needed 89 to win. The turnout, as far as the popular vote, was down 8.5%, down to 23.8. And again, this is the first election where when they're deciding who is president and who is vice president on the ballot, they have to actually name who they're choosing as president, who they're choosing as vice president. So Thomas Jefferson obviously runs again as president for re-election, but Aaron Burr is not running with him. Jefferson pushed him out of the ticket. And there was actually a process, basically kind of a nominating process to decide, who would be his vice presidential running mate. George Clinton would eventually come out on top and be his vice presidential running mate, who was the governor of New York between 1777 and 1795, and then again between 1801 and 1804. Also vying to be his vice presidential nominee was John Breckinridge of Kentucky, U.S. Senator. Gideon Granger, who was the Postmaster General from Connecticut. John Langdon, a former U.S. Senator from New Hampshire. Levi Lincoln, a U.S. Attorney General from Massachusetts. And William Maclay, a former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. On the Federalist side, again, Charles Pickney is the candidate for president, and His running mate is Rufus King, who is a former U.S. minister to Great Britain from 1796 to 1803. But you know what? This was not even really a contest. Thomas Jefferson would win easily, garnering 162 electoral votes to Charles Pinckney's 14. He carried 15 states to Pinckney's 2. Let's get down to the election. And we actually have more states that voted by popularity. I mean, because there were really only two men running for president. It was between Thomas Jefferson and Pinckney. Thomas Jefferson received 162 electoral votes for president. George Clinton received 162 electoral votes for vice president. And this is interesting. They don't have a full breakdown like they have in the past. I'm at a little bit of a loss. So, But I guess that's how it gets solidified is, I'll just read it off the map. Massachusetts gave all 19 of its electoral votes to Jefferson. New Hampshire, all 7 to Jefferson. Vermont, 6 to Jefferson. New York, 19 to Jefferson. Rhode Island, 4 for Jefferson. Connecticut, 9 for Pinckney. That's one of the 2 states he won. New Jersey, 8 to Jefferson. Pennsylvania, 20 to Jefferson. Ohio, new state, 3 to Jefferson. Kentucky, 8 to Jefferson. Virginia, 24 to Jefferson. Okay. Maryland, 9 to Jefferson, 2 to Pinckney. Delaware, 3 to Pinckney, the only other state he won. North Carolina, 14 to Jefferson. Tennessee, 5 to Jefferson. South Carolina with 10 to Jefferson. And Georgia was 6 to Jefferson. So let's talk real quick about how they chose their electors. Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, New York, South Carolina, and Vermont all chose their electors by state legislature. New Hampshire, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Virginia chose their electors by having the voters select. Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, and Tennessee, their states were divided into electoral districts with one elector chosen per district by the voters of that district, which is how it should be done to this day. And then in Massachusetts, they go back to their complicated ways of electing their electors. 2 electors were chosen by voters statewide, usually lined up with the Senate. And then 1 elector was chosen per congressional district in a statewide vote. So basically, for Massachusetts, 2 were chosen by the legislature. Was that right? No, 2 were chosen by the voters statewide, and the other 17 were chosen also statewide, but by congressional district. So, like, I thought this segment would be a little bit, it's not short. But that's it for the Electoral College. After the next break, we'll talk about the popularity vote, and then I just have one more segment for the evening, which is my take. All right, live streamers, which is still just me. Wow, I've been doing this for quite a while. This is taking more time than I thought it would. But I guess it shows what happens when you actually sit down and research what you're doing instead of just kind of winging it, which actually I fell into that trap I just assumed that as I went through the elections, they would still do the breakdown by state. So let me do an addendum at the end of the popular vote. Done with that one. About Britannica. About 2000. Site is always broke. No, it doesn't break it down either. And one interesting note that will not be on the podcast, will only be on the live feed, is during this time between 1800 and 1804, Jefferson brought in the Louisiana Purchase. And it was a really popular decision. It probably helped propel him to his second term. That doesn't really help me either. Come on now. Bother. No, they're all just over here. Nope. All the breakdowns are just done by maps. That's maybe Thomas Jefferson's actual website will help us out. Nope. This is bizarre. Bizarre. Actually, even worse. That's the worst one I've seen so far. All right, so won't be adding an addendum. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Thanks for interrupting me. My computer was really happy to tell me that it had not detected any file attacks. Cool. All right, so now we're going to briefly go over, and this is where we actually get to spend a little bit more time on the popular vote. And as we start adding more states, we'll actually spend more and more time on the popular vote than we do on the Electoral College, even though the Electoral College is who decides the president. So with this election, let's see, 1, 2, 3. There's 17 states. Ooh, that's right. Yeah, 17 states. And we actually have vote totals of 11. So 11 out of 17 isn't bad. And we actually finally have results from Kentucky and Tennessee. Sort of. We even have ballots from Ohio, who just became a state. So I'm going to run down these real quick. And just to note, all these states that I'm about to go through were all run by Jefferson. So in Kentucky, there were 5,080 votes cast. They were all cast for Jefferson. He won with 100% of the vote. In Maryland, Jefferson garnered 7,304 votes to Pinckney's 2,295 votes, a difference of 5,009 votes. or a margin of 52.18%. In Massachusetts, a little bit closer. Jefferson picked up 29,599 votes to Pinckney's 25,644 votes, a difference of 3,955 votes, or a margin of 7.16%. I'm sorry for that bump. New Hampshire gotten a little closer. 9,088 votes for Thomas Jefferson, 8,386 votes for Charles Pinckney, a difference of 702 votes or 4.02%. New Jersey, complete blowout. Thomas Jefferson received 13,119 votes to Charles Pinckney's 19 votes. A difference of 13,100 or a margin of 99.72%. And, well, this is interesting out of North Carolina, and I think... Okay. So, not going to talk about North Carolina because they're only showing results for districts 8 and 10. The other 12 appear to be lost, so there's no reason even going over those numbers. In Ohio, Thomas Jefferson picked up 2,593 votes to Pinckney's 364 votes, a difference of 2,229 votes, or a margin of 75.38%. In Pennsylvania, Thomas Jefferson picked up 22,081 votes to Pinckney's 1,239 votes, a difference of 20,842 votes, or a margin of 89.38%. In Rhode Island, Jefferson picked up all 1,312 votes. In Tennessee, Jefferson picked up all 778 votes. And then in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson picked up 12,926 votes to Pinckney's 75 votes, a margin of 12,851 or 98.84%. So as the popular vote goes, Jefferson won 72.8% to 27.2%. The electoral vote, he won 92% of the electors. So that's it for the 4th and 5th. Quadrennial, just looking ahead. Our next episode will cover the 6th and 7th. The 6th will be Charles Pinckney's last election that he runs, or at least as the presidential nominee. Let me see if it's... I'm assuming it's probably because he passed away. No, he passed away in 1825. So it looks like he just retired in 1812. I'll just make sure. Yeah, because he did not run on the Federalist ticket. Okay. So that is it, again, for the 4th and 5th quadrennial elections. After I take a quick break, I'm going to come back with my take on this past week. All right, so we're coming up to the end of the episode. I still got actually a lot of stuff to do to finish out the episode. It's going to be a little bit more sullen. Hey, I don't know if that's serious. I guess that's a better word, serious. Just talking about the events of the last week. It's kind of amazing when you think. Has it been? Yeah. It's been over a week since they tried to take over the Capitol. Wow. All right, adding that piece in. All right. Wow, this is not a long episode. I'm only up to about 40 minutes. Well, this probably got long. All right. So this is going to be completely unscripted. I'm not looking at anything. Just basically talking about the politics of the moment. All right. So now it is time for my take. It's been over a week since the insurrection attempt at the Capitol of the United States. There have been hundreds of arrests to this point. And a lot of these insurrectionists are whining about being treated as terrorists or traitors to their country, when that's exactly what they are. They had ill intent when they stormed that Capitol. Now, I'm sure there were some bystanders who came out to protest, but never had any real thought to doing what happened. But when you're caught in the crowd, you're going to go with the crowd. And this is all propagated on the big lie that the election was stolen, that it was full of fraud. And, I heard something interesting this week, that especially for those that were caught up in the moment, that probably didn't go with any intention to storm the Capitol, but still went into the Capitol illegally, that because of the algorithms, specifically on Facebook, the way they have it set up, they basically have it set up for people who are weak-minded, or don't research their own facts, to basically go into a rabbit hole of conspiracy and racism. You read one article, and the next thing you know, there's another article for you to read. And then there's a video for you to watch. And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And the next thing you know, you are 100% convinced that the Democratic Party is nothing but cannibalistic pedophiles. And you see them as complete evil, and they need to be completely removed from life. None of that's true. Those who have a sane mind, those who think for themselves, know that that's not true. But they've allowed themselves to be caught up in this. And this is what I've always said about people who believe in conspiracy theories. You believe what you want to believe if it makes you feel better. In other words, if you don't like the answer you're seeing in front of you, even if that answer is fact, you will find something to disprove that in your mind. And frankly, that's going to take a lot of deprogramming to bring these people back. And I'm not sure that we are able to do that. One, we've got to educate our people. Donald Trump was not lying when he said he loves the uneducated, because he knows that he can lie to them with every breath that he takes, and they will accept it no matter what. But what I want to focus on are those senators and representatives who watched the Capitol be taken over, who know that if the Secret Service had not moved Pence as quick as they did, if they were a little slow in their response, there is a good chance that Pence would have been killed. Nancy Pelosi would have been killed. Chuck Schumer would have been killed. Any Republican that they saw as standing in the way of Donald Trump becoming or continuing to be president would have been killed. I have no doubt in my mind. And for these senators and representatives to go through that and then go back to the floor and continue the big lie and still vote to basically overthrow the election. Now, Senator Langford, who is the junior senator of my state of Oklahoma, apologized to a group of North Tulsan black people because he claims that he didn't know that the tenor of trying to overthrow the votes in these particular states was actually trying to overthrow the black vote in these states. Now, I'm not sure what to tell the senator. I don't know if he's been living with his head under the sand for the last 4 years. And I'm not speaking for the black population at all. I'm speaking for myself, but I don't buy his apology. I don't accept it either. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. Fortunately, it took an insurrection to cause him to not go ahead and vote. But we have a serious issue in this country. And it's not as simple as Trump leaving office. Now, I still fully believe that Trump's power is gone. And we kind of saw that in the election in Georgia, where both Democrats pretty handily beat the Republican senators because Trump was not on the ticket. So now the fight becomes who takes up the mantle for Trump? Who runs for president in 2024 to try to recapture that Trump base? And I don't think there is anyone that can outside of Trump. I don't think there's anyone in the I know Ted Cruz is going to try, but I don't think the Trump cult likes him at all. No one really likes him. I don't know how he got reelected. There's Hawley from Missouri. I think he stands the best chance. But I just don't see anyone capturing his base the way he captured the base. And I think it spells a lot of trouble for the Republican Party going forward. Now, we'll see in 2022 and again in 2024. I could be completely wrong. I have pronounced the Republican National Party dead before in 2012. But maybe they've been going through the death throes of their downward spiral. It's completely possible that we may be entering, I believe, the seventh. Yeah, I think it's completely possible that we're entering into the seventh party system in the United States that could see a complete break of the Republican Party. I don't know what, but the moderates no longer have control of the Republican Party. They don't. I don't know if they switch and become Democrats. Some have. But I think it's more likely that we'll probably see two parties come out. And, we could be looking at what we saw with the first or the second so want to make sure I have these right. Let's look it up. Oh, here we are. Yeah, the first party system. The first party system was the Democratic Republican Party system, especially beginning with the election of 1800. We would not see another political party actually gain the White House until 1836. Now, during that time, we do enter the second political party system, and we see the Democratic and Republican Party split. But the Democratic base of that essentially held office for 36 years. So, yeah, we'll see where we go. I still fully believe that those responsible for the insurrection last week, whether they're the ones that actually broke into the Capitol, whether they're the senators and representatives who led tours of the Capitol the day before, whether it's the President of the United States, that those responsible need to be held accountable. It is simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. So, with all that, that is my take on this week. Next week, we will have a new president of the United States. But we are still in this COVID mess. So, as always, stay safe. Wear your mask out in public. Stay 6 feet apart as much as possible. And have a wonderful week. Good night, forecasters. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that segment as is, even though it's about 11 minutes. I've previously said I don't like separating them, but I'm going to leave it like it is. Mostly because I'm tired. I've got other things I want to do tonight. Play on my VR, my virtual reality goggles. So, letting this process. I wish I had people watching because I would actually put it up to a vote of whether or not I should do background music, but I think I'm going to. Anyways, still processing because it is a long segment, but that did get me up to about 50 minutes, so even though I did ramble, it is still processing. That is, I hope it doesn't break it. Okay, good. There it goes. And I don't know. I'm thinking. I've got to figure out how to do it, but I'm thinking of live casting the presidential inauguration. No one knows what it's going to look like yet. Uh-oh. Well, I saw that. I put that in the wrong spot. Got to put my ad. I think that's the halfway point. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. It is what it is. Find my other self-promotion ad. It's becoming harder and harder to find them. I may have to record another one here soon. Oh, gotta do my intros and outros. Otherwise. Come on. It's proven to be a lot more difficult than it needs to be. Nope. Try that again. There we go. And then the outro. Should have gone ahead and... sorry, I'm mumbling. Should have gone ahead and scrolled to the bottom of the show. Okay, but still got to find that other ad. There it is. I'm definitely going to have to do another ad. Okay, so now here comes a part that I kind of enjoy, and that's finding background music. So, let's see. I don't want calm. That's yuck. I've used that one. Let's try another one. Oh, that's like a wingspan. There we go. Let's see how it sounds. Good evening, forecasters. This is Michael Hendricks coming to you on chain. Okay. So I'm going to use wingspan for all of my segments outside of the last one, which I'll kind of bring it down a little bit. So, as we move on. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely the background music. So it'll take me a few minutes to do this. I go when I find someone that just, it just hits me right, you know? And this will actually take the longest bit. Because I do have quite a few segments to go through. But you are getting the behind the scenes look that those who just listen don't get. So what happened here? Where goes that one? Okay. And if anyone has any really cool ideas on how I can style my hair so it doesn't fall on my face every time I move, hit me up. It's weird. Okay, let's find something for my take. Not that one. I think we'll go with that one. Let's see how it sounds. All right, so I like it. It sounds good. All right, two more. Oh, yeah, two more segments, and then I'll be done. And all that's left is posting it, which eventually, probably sometime tomorrow when I get up, I will put it out there. I haven't looked at it recently, but it was really awesome that one that I did during the insurrection got close to 20 listens, which for me is huge. And I didn't advertise it at all. I just live streamed it. But don't look a gift horse in the mouth. All right, let's see how long this takes. So I'm ready to save this episode and get it out there for everyone. And maybe on the next live stream, depending on when I'm able to do it, I'll actually show you the process of getting it. Well, that's why I wish the live streaming was a little bit more like Zoom, so I could just share my screen, but that would be too difficult, apparently. Okay. I thought I did that one. Okay. I think that's it. All right. Saving the episode. Fourth. Typing too fast. Oh, wait. I just realized I forgot. I completely forgot to go over Trump being impeached for the second time. I gotta go back and do that. Or do I? Yeah, I do. I do. Okay. All right. So I was, just about to post this episode out, and I realized that I had completely forgot about the fact that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, had been impeached for the second time. The only president in American history to actually be impeached twice. Now, no president has been convicted. One president actually resigned, and that was Nixon, before he was impeached. He probably would have been convicted because they had the votes. But what is different about this impeachment is that 10 Republicans actually voted to impeach. Now, that may not seem like a very high number, considering 197 voted not to impeach. But the previous high for the president's party voting to impeach was when Clinton was impeached, when 5 Democrats voted to impeach him. So 10 Republicans deciding that he needs to be impeached and removed does kind of give the outward appearance that there is a break in the party at this point. And one of the big one of the big votes to impeach came from Representative Liz Cheney, who is the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. She is about as conservative as you can get. But she even saw the writing on the wall. And then 9 other Republicans joined her in voting to impeach. Now, of course, Mitch McConnell, who has been Trump's lapdog since he became president, and who's about to lose his power on Wednesday, refused to call an emergency Senate meeting to try the president. So what does that actually mean? Does that mean that once Trump's term ends on the 20th, that he cannot be convicted? No. Yes, he can still be convicted, even if he's not in office. It's been done before, not at the presidential level, but it has been done before where someone has left office and was still convicted. He can still be convicted. So what does it mean if he's convicted after he leaves office? Well, he loses some of the things the former presidents get. But the bigger challenge, now, in order to convict him, they still need 2/3. So Democrats need to find 17 or possibly 18 Republicans to vote to convict. So let's say they do go ahead and convict him. The next step is See, here's the thing. As it stands right now, if a president is convicted of an impeachment, they can still run for office. They can still run for office, federal office. They can run for president again. So the Senate would actually have to go through a new vote to essentially bar him from ever running for federal office again. And to do that, they only need a majority vote. And as long as some of the more moderate Democrats don't split from the party, the Democratic Party would have the votes to bar him from running again. So that's my little addendum. He should have, and lest we forget, he was impeached for inciting an insurrection, and he should have been impeached, and he should be convicted. I'll stop. All right, that's my addendum for tonight. Y'all have a good week, and I'll talk to you next week. I honestly, I can't believe that I forgot to mention that he was impeached. Oops. Hopefully this, and I'm not going to actually put music this one since it's an addendum. Just waiting for it to process. So this will put me right at an hour. All right, so now we are ready to go. I need to publish it. There it is. All right, and it's done. It is out there. It is out there for the world to see. I want to thank anyone who happens upon this, because this will go into my channel. I hope you get a little taste of what I do to do my podcast. And, thank you for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe if you happen upon this and you like what you hear and see. Otherwise, this is my podcast. Stay safe. Wear a mask out in public. Socially distanced by 6 feet at least if you're able to. But good night and good luck.